8 last time, 6 this time. Okay, chapters. All right.
Yeah.
Is it 6 chapters?
Yeah.
Yes, 11 through 16. Right. And okay, so we are on lesson 4 of Revelation Part 2. We are still in the part that's called Picturing Revelation because why?
Because we're drawing.
You're supposed to be drawing, and if not, you're listing it out. That is an option. In any way, in any form, the goal of doing the pictures and the goal and or of writing it out is what? To help you remember, to learn, to go really deep in detail, right? If you're trying to read a narrative of some sort or whatever that is written, and this is a narrative, and then you're trying to put it on paper in a picture, you have to have looked pretty long and hard at those details. And like I said last week, you might on occasion, or often, or every time, wad up that piece of paper every now and then and throw it in the trash because it is sometimes hard to undo by eraser. Sometimes you just need to start all over. I do, if you can see, this one is like my first one. I have kind of the cartoon frame kind of sometimes because the action changes. And in order for me to try to change the action, I'm not good enough to draw that in one picture. So some of my chapters have kind of parts as the action changes and as new things come on the scene. You also probably saw, if you could see that, lots of words. Because sometimes it's a bubble, a conversation bubble, you know, like you'd see in a cartoon again. Or it might be just something I can't write any other way. Like I really can't draw sackcloth. So I wrote sackcloth and pointed to it on my stick figure people. I do use a lot of the symbols. If I have a symbol, like for angel or for triune God, I will use that rather than trying to actually draw God. I will just sometimes use the symbol I use. Carolyn mentioned last week that she has gone back over hers and written the verse number next to a particular detail so that she could refer back well, which is a really great, and I'll tell on her, but she has done this course before, so she's actually reusing her old pictures, going over them again, and that's just a way for her to go back over the details and write the details out. So you can do that. If you want to commission an artist to do these, go right ahead. There is value in you putting it to paper, putting a pen or pencil. I do use colored pencils sometimes also. So there's value in all of this. There is a reason we're doing this. We are starting in chapter 11 today, but we're going to do a little bit of review. We're in the book of Revelation. Who is the author? John. John is the human that God used to write it down when we say author. Ultimately, and where was the source of this information? God. And so God the Father gave it to Jesus the Son. And then he gave it to his angel, and he gave it to John, the one that we say wrote it down, and John ultimately gave it to us the bondservants. And he says that, where do we find that information? And actually, no, not
that was
119.
that was the one.
Great verse, but
yeah.
we saw that given to us in Revelation 1, but we saw it at the very beginning of the chapter, the process and how we got it. Now in Revelation 1:19, what do we find? The segment divisions, the things he was told to write down. Yes, John was told to write how many things? How many categories? Three categories. The first one is the things he had seen, the things which are, and the things which take place after these things. And so the things that he had seen, where is that covered? Chapter 1. The things which are, where is that covered? 2 and 3, which we also call the messages to the churches. Yes, and how many churches were there? 7. Where were they located? Asia Minor, modern day Turkey. Thank you. And then the next segment division is the things that will take place after these things. That starts where? Chapter 4 and continues to 22. So it covers the rest of the book. So Revelation, as this study, has 4 parts. We did part 1 last time. It covered essentially 1, 2, and 3, those first 2 segment divisions. So parts 2, 3, and 4 will all continue to go over that 3rd segment division, and that's where we are. We're going to now focus on chapters 4 through 22. Not that the first 3 aren't important, it's just that we've covered those to some extent. We will still refer back to them, because again, we got in 119 the segment divisions. As I said last week, you will probably find, as we go through this course, you might find other ways to segment divide the book. That's always okay, unless you're wrong. But it is okay because you will find certain things may be covered in certain areas and you want to say, that's here, this is here. And on your at-a-glance charts that you got in your workbook, or if you have the Indexed Study Bible, it's in there as well. On the side where all the chapters are listed, you can make another category and add in beyond this, the 3 that we were given in Revelation chapter 1:19. Whenever you're doing any of this information, we do chapter studies or anything else, and you make lists, do what we were saying that Carolyn's doing in her drawings, and that is, as you make your list, write the verse beside it, and that way you can always really quickly, in addition to if you have done your symbols and marking, you can glance down your page and gather that information. So there's value in all of this. There's a lot of value in going over and over and over it. So last week we went through our picturing of Revelations chapters 4 through 10. The video cut out just at the very end when we've gotten into 10. We're going to try to stay on track a little better today with our time. We being me. We being, okay, you can come with me. So we ended last time, where were we in understanding when we got into 4, John was caught up into heaven, right? And this is the heaven in heaven. And he described that for us where? In what chapters? 4 and 5 for sure. The narrative kind of continued. It was not an end. Remember, chapters are a man-made division of a book. Just helps us have an address to go to. When I can say chapter 6, verse 3, we can all go to that place. And it kind of gives us a little bit of order. But when it was written, it was not written like you have it in your Bible. It wasn't said chapter 6, verse 3. So there was a narrative going on, a description that John was given, and he gave it in chapter 4. Overall, what do we see? You can just give your chapter title. He saw, John was caught up into heaven, and he saw what? What was the first thing he started describing? The throne that's in the center of everything, and he who sits on the throne. And then we also saw what is surrounding that throne. 24 elders on thrones, right? And they have crowns. And we see, what do we hear and hear being said? What's going on? What's the context of what's going on? What's that?
Worship.
Worship. Lots of worship from different groups, right? So we have worship going on from the elders. We have another group that's surrounding the throne. Inside, the 4 living creatures, they're also worshiping, right? They're words of worship that they're given. We're given descriptions of number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and we'll study that in more detail later. Then we have some other person, a character, coming into that inner circle, and who is that? That's coming in chapter 5. The Lamb. The Lamb of God. When he is described, how do we know who he is? Tribe of Judah, root of David, standing as if slain. He has purchased from the earth what? With what? It doesn't necessarily say it in 5. It goes in another description. He's purchased from the earth people with his blood. So who do we know the Lamb is? Jesus. We don't have to guess. We know this is Jesus. It also tells us, even by our song today, worthy is the Lamb, right? Who was slain. There's worship that goes on about him. So we have worship of he who sits on the throne. We know that's God. And then we have the worship of the Lamb. And they're not told not to worship him. Remember that. They're doing this in heaven, in the presence of he who sits on the throne. So this is correct. The worship is correct. And who only is worthy of worship? God. And yes, the Lamb, and the Lamb is God, is part of the triune God. It's kind of a proof, as some people sometimes have a problem with Jesus being God. He would not be worshipped correctly. He would not be worshipped if he wasn't worthy of that worship. But the worship, they specifically mention, worthy is the Lamb who was slain because, and it gives the description of why. So these are all important things. People, Vince, or I keep saying people, and I want to say characters. These are real creatures. These are real, but they're not all people, right? Then we see other groups as the narrative goes on, as John is being given this this revelation that he is supposed to write about. We see other groups in heaven. Who else do we see? I'm sorry? There's angels, and how many are there? Well, there's 7 at one point, but when you see the worship in heaven, you see myriads. You just see lots of them. But as we move on, the Lamb, it comes in, he's worthy to do what? In this actual description.
Power and riches and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing.
Yeah, a lot. Nice long list. And he specifically goes over and takes out of the right hand of he who sits on the throne what? A book or a scroll. And that has what? 7 seals on it. John weeps when he sees it, so we have some indication that this is important. We don't know exactly what that means yet, but we'll get into that. And the Lamb goes and takes it, and then eventually what does he start doing? Starts opening those seals, right? As each seal is broken, there's action, right? Where did we see how many? When the seals start being broken, how many do we see broken immediately? 6, one at a time. And where do we find that? Chapter 6. Yes, 6 seals are broken in chapter 6. In the 5th seal, we see another group. It's the souls under the altar. That's another group of people. They're described. As we move on in chapter 7, we see another group of people that are mentioned, 2 actually different groups. 144,000, and we know they are from where? From the earth. They're from, no, not the tribulation. They're from the earth. They're from 12 tribes that are named. And how many from each tribe? 12,000. And when they're named here, what are the angels told to do or not to do regarding this 144,000? Seal them with the seal of God. Okay? So the 144,000 are sealed. This is on earth, as Carolyn's pointing out, because remember, we're trying to figure out if things are happening in heaven or on earth. Sometimes it's in heaven that John sees it, and then the event happens on earth. Then we see a great multitude. That's another group that we see, and they come out of the tribulation. We see those in chapter 7. Remember, 7 divides into 14, 144,000. It's a kind of a way to remember it. Where else are the 144,000? If I'm using my 7 and 144,000? 14. Very good. So those 2 chapters, 7 and 14. And then we have in chapter 8, we have 7th seal is broken. Remember, and Sandy just pointed out, Jesus breaks that 7th, or the Lamb breaks the 7th seal. He's doing that. He's bringing these events about. God is fully responsible. He would be anyway, but in this case, he's really taking action, and we can point back to him. Out of that 7th seal comes what? 4 trumpets in this chapter, but there are 7 angels, right? And yes, Martha, 4 are blown or sounded in this chapter. So we've got the 7th seal broken, and as the 7th seal broken, 7 angels come and are given 7 trumpets and told that they're going to sound or blow, we would say, but they're going to sound those trumpets. And then 4 of those are sounded in this chapter. And then the idea of woe, woe, woe. 3 woes are said, and they seem to be attached to the last 3 trumpets that have yet to sound. Okay? Keep that in mind as we go forward. So in chapter 9, you have the 5th trumpet, and then it says at the end, the first woe is past, and then the 6th trumpet is blown, right? And we continued on in chapters, that was 9. And then in chapter 10, we kind of have like a different scene that John sees. We have another character. Who is that? Strong angel. And what does he have? A book, a little book. And what is said about this book? John was told to eat it. And what did he say? What was he told, and what happened?
It would be sweet, but then it would be bitter.
Right. Sweet in his mouth, bitter in his stomach. Kind of gives you an idea of maybe what this is. He hears something he's told not to write. Remember? What does he hear? 7 peals of thunder. Whatever they said, John is told not to write. Okay? There's a time phrase in verse 7 of chapter 10. It says, in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, and the seventh trumpet hadn't sounded yet, but in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he is about to sound, then the mystery of God is finished. It's important to remember that. And then John, at the very end of that chapter, is told, you've got more to write. Okay? We're still in the segment division. It's not over yet. And John is told, continue on. Okay? So now we're going to look at chapters 11 through 16. We're going to try to put some things up on the board as we can, but we're going to look at 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16 today. You want to mark up here? We're going to list some of the events. We want to be detailed, but we can't stay forever, and all of your questions are going to be answered. Okay? You've gotten to the point now where sometimes you ask a question and go, you're probably not going to tell me the answer to this. And I'm glad, just be patient, because you need to find these things out, and we will. I don't want to just tell you. I don't want to spoil the joy of discovery, but the other thing I don't want to do is, if I tell you, you won't remember. If you see it for yourself and you've dug that nugget out for yourself, chances are you're going to remember. I was in Sunday school on Sunday, and we were doing Proverbs in our Sunday school class, and a proverb reminded him of another proverb, and he goes, I don't know where it is. And I said, it's on the right-hand side about halfway down the page. I flipped a few pages and I found it. I don't know why. I can put it, if you see it in your own Bible, or you might be seeing it on your observation worksheets, which is fine because it's printed out for you, but it's great to know you've seen it. You don't remember necessarily chapter and verse. You may not get it word perfect, but you can grasp the concept. And I'll tell you, when I do that, when I'm going, oh, it says something like, I might go back and look it up, and then it's reinforced. Okay? The more we go over this, the more we go. And remember, after we do this picturing, we're going to be doing some charting, and you're going to be writing this information out. You're going to write it so many times, and don't get frustrated. It's an awesome process. I think you're going to learn, and then we've got 2 more parts after this. Yes, Cindy?
I was just drawing these pictures and writing this stuff, and I do not understand it.
That's right. You don't. And part of it, as we've said many times, with prophecy of any kind that's unfulfilled, when it begins to happen, we're going to say, oh, that's how. You could probably think of things in your life where somebody even wrote you out a card or something, and they're describing something. Let's say they're describing a birthday party, and then you go and you go, oh, that's what they were talking about, the bouncy thing that we're going to jump on. You know, when you see it, the description makes sense. And, and I hope to have a bird's eye view. So. And hopefully we'll have my commentator, right there next to me, an angel or God or somebody telling me exactly. But so as we look at chapter 11, who are we introduced to in chapter 11? Well, actually, there's some information before we're introduced to some people. What are we told that here? John was given what?
Measuring rod.
A measuring rod. Okay. So John is given a measuring rod. What is he told to measure? Okay, he's told to measure the temple of God. Okay, I'm sorry, somebody said something.
Temple of God.
Temple of God and the altar and
the worshipers.
the people who worship there. Okay, so he's told to measure. I don't know how you measure people, but count them, knock them on the head. I don't know. See how tall they are. But he's told to leave off
The court outside.
the court. Why?
It's going to be given to the nations.
It's going to be given to the nations to do what?
They'll
Trample it underfoot for
42 months.
42 months. So we have a time phrase. So John is told, measure the court. We've seen this kind of idea elsewhere, if that rings any bells with Ezekiel, for instance. Okay. But John is told here, remember when I'm doing my picturing also, a lot of times John will say, I looked and saw, and I'll just have John kind of off to the side. I'll have to name him. and maybe an arrow coming out of his eye saying he's looking. So it's almost like it's saying, here's another thing to look at. Here's another thing I saw. It kind of progresses the story to some extent. But here it says, John was given to a measuring rod like a staff, and he's told to measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there. So where is this temple?
On earth.
On earth. Important, remember. So John is told this, so this action takes place on earth. Because remember, he described heaven and the throne and everything to us in 4. We've got to make sure we're not talking about that. Right? But why do we know this is on earth? There's earth dwellers, the EDs. But certainly we talk about it's going to be trampled underfoot by the nations. That would not be in heaven, would it? Right? It's talking about earth. Sometimes it's just something that simple, a little bit detail, where we can know where this is. Sometimes we can't, and we just leave it alone if we can. All right. And then he's being told that he will grant authority to who? There's 2 witnesses. Who's 2 witnesses? Right. Because we kind of want to keep our players separate to know whose team they're playing on. So we've got these 2 witnesses. These are God's witnesses. It says my witnesses. And they will do what? For how long? 1,260 days. Somebody threw it. Yes. Okay, so now we have 42 months written up here for the trampling underfoot, and now we have 1,260 days. If I said 42 months, we translate that in our minds, as was already done, to how many years? 3.5 years. Okay, it doesn't say 3.5 years, but we're going to leave it at 42 months. But we know with a 12-month year, that's 3.5 years. If we go to 1,260 days, even with our 365 and a quarter day calendar, or leap year calendar, about how long is that? 3.5 years. If you take a 360-day Jewish calendar, that's exactly 3.5 years. So now we have 2 time frames that are talked about, 2 periods of time talked about that are the same length of time. Does it tell you they're the same time? Okay? I can tell you that something is two different things that happened in 3 years, but that doesn't mean it's the same 3 years. So that's something we're going to leave for now. Just know that it's mentioned. Okay? So for 3.5 or 1,260 days, and they're going to be clothed in sackcloth. Okay? Not the height of fashion.
That's almost like a mourning garb.
Usually that would be the sackcloth and ashes, right? That's kind of a biblical idea. So it kind of begins to make you think of something, right? Sackcloth. She's saying that's more of a mourning type of outfit or garment.
Not mourning AM.
Yes, MOURN. Right. Then it says these are 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. These are interesting pieces of information that I just wrote out, or you could try to draw 2 olive trees and 2 lampstands, however you...
Is that in heaven or earth?
Well, let's figure that out. Good question. Is this heaven or is this earth? Good point. Going forward, it says they have the power to shut up the sky in order that rain may not fall during the days the 2 are prophesying, and they have the power of the waters to turn them into blood and to smite the earth with every plague as often as they desire. And they're testifying, it says. They're prophesying and they're testifying. Oh, and it also says, back up to verse 5. If anyone desires to harm them, fire proceeds out of their mouths and devours their enemies. And if anyone would desire to harm them in this manner, he must be killed. So where is this happening? On earth, right. These events are not happening in heaven. These are happening on earth for a period of 1,260 days that we're given. Okay? And then it says they have the power to shut up the sky and all that in verse 6. Verse 7 it says, and when they have finished their testimony, so what period of time would that be? 1,260 days, or how long they're able to do all of this, and they're testifying, so it's another piece of information of what they're doing. And so it says, at the end of that, it says, what is going to happen?
The beast comes out of the abyss.
The beast that comes up out of the abyss will make war with them and will overcome them and will Kill them. Okay, this is the first mention of the beast. Okay, you have been introduced to him before, but not before this chapter. I mean, as we read through, so sometimes it's hard because you kind of already know something to remember now you're hearing it for the first time. The beast. Now, is this the same beast? That's a good question that I just asked and didn't answer. Is it? It gives you a piece of information. This is a beast that comes out of the abyss. Now, thinking about, without trying to go into too much detail or holding on here, but I want you to think, you may have already, if they had the power to do all that was mentioned there, anybody that came to harm them was to be killed by the fire that proceeds out of their mouths. And now, the beast comes along, and what does he do? Kills them. And all of this, people are going to see and know about. We have CNN now. Or everybody's got their cameras. You know, everything that goes on in this world now is filmed. Fox, yes. Hopefully.
All right, you'll get a better idea.
And then it describes that their dead bodies will be in the streets of the great city, which is mystically called Sodom and Egypt. We don't know what the city this is yet because it doesn't make sense. What city would be called Sodom and Egypt? But it's a great city. And then it says, where also their Lord was crucified. If they are God's witnesses, who is their Lord?
Jesus.
Okay, so now we also know their Lord is Jesus. What does that tell you about these two witnesses? They're believers. Yes, they're believers, and they're followers of Christ. He is their Lord. So what city is this? Jerusalem. Okay, if you didn't know it before that moment, they're giving you pieces, but it also gives you backward information. It's like you go back and you go, Jerusalem is called Sodom and Egypt?
I know that's,
Yeah.
it makes you look at that.
It makes you wonder. It
Yes.
does. And then it says, and those from the peoples and tribes and tongues and nations will look at their dead bodies for how many? 3.5 days. So they're going to be dead for 3.5 days. How many years was this 1260 related to? 3.5 years. How many years was Jesus' earthly ministry? About 3.5 years. Not that that means anything, it's just an interesting piece of information. God is about numbers. God is all about numbers. What's twice 3.5? 7. 7 is a great number with God, isn't it? Okay, so 3.5 days though, after their ministry, after their testimony ended, for 3.5 days, their dead bodies will lie in the street and they won't be allowed to be buried. It's interesting. It's kind of gross, actually. Okay. One of the first times I studied Revelation was around the time of the Somalia incident. Do y'all remember the Somalia incident of about 15 or 20 years ago? I've forgotten how long ago it's been, where we had soldiers that were killed in Somalia, American soldiers, and what did they do with their bodies? Drug them through the streets. And we all got to see this because of like CNN that was available at the time, and it was the first time in human history, not that particular event, but time frame wise, it was the first time in human history that everyone in the world could see an event happening at the same time. And I'm telling you, it was powerful to think about we're in that generation. Because no time before in history could this event be witnessed by the whole world. The event that's listed here in chapter 11. Now we know it can be. And so we're at a different time. It's getting closer. I agree. Okay. Not setting dates, but it's getting closer. And it says, those who dwell on the earth, and we've said many times that is a key phrase, will rejoice over them and make merry and will send gifts to one another. So they're celebrating because these two prophets, if you didn't think of them as prophets before, they're prophets. Prophets were tormented. No, they tormented those who dwell on the earth. And after 3.5 days, what happens? Yes. After 3.5 days, they're dead. They come alive, and where do they go?
Breath of life from God came into them.
Okay. So they came back. The breath of life comes into them, and what happens? Stood on their feet, and they ascend to heaven. And who witnessed all that? Yes, their enemies. All those people that have been sending gifts and rejoicing for 3.5 days now are watching them rise up to heaven. Amazing, right? They're told to come up here. Where else have you heard that word, that phrase, come up here? Yes, at the beginning of 4. Yes, with John, exactly. Right. Okay. And great fear fell upon people. And then it said there was a great earthquake in that hour. So that in that hour is tied to what? The event we just mentioned. Right. Those two being taken to heaven. In that hour there's a great earthquake. 1/10 of the city fell. Which city? Jerusalem. 1/10 of it. And then it said 7,000 people were killed by the earthquake. The rest were terrified and gave glory to the God of heaven. Very interesting set of circumstances. Then it says the second woe is past. What has been going on all this time? It's not mentioned in this chapter. You have to go back a couple of chapters. The 6th trumpet had been blown. Now the second woe is past. But then it says the third is coming quickly. What would be the third woe? What's it tied to? The 7th trumpet that's coming after the 6th trumpet. Then it says the 7th trumpet sounded. Okay? And there arose loud voices in heaven, and they're saying, the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever. Okay, so as the 7th trumpet is being sounded, it's saying the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord. There's a shift. Yes, yes. And of his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever. And it says the 24 elders who sit on their thrones before God fell on their faces and worshiped God. It's not the first time we've seen them do that. Okay? Are we going to possibly do that kind of thing when we're around the throne of God? Yes, yes. We're seeing action here. And then it says, we give thanks. It says what they say. But then in verse 18, what does it say? The nations were enraged, and his wrath came, and the time came. These are time phrases for the dead to be judged. And what else?
Bondservants rewarded.
Yes, dead will be judged, and bondservants will be rewarded.
Prophets, saints.
The saints and to those who fear thy name, the small and the great, and to destroy those who dwell on the earth. Remember, that's a phrase. Those who dwell, I call them EDs, earth dwellers. And the temple of God, which is in heaven. Okay, so these events are happening on earth, and then you see something happening in heaven. So you've got the 7th trumpet here. Up here, I guess I should put second woe is past. Third coming. Sorry, I'm kind of messing up my writing. The 7th trumpet sounds, and there's those time phrases, the worship that goes on, and it says the temple of God which is in heaven. What happens? Was open. And what else?
You see the Ark of
The Ark of the Covenant appears in his temple, right? And there were lightning, thunder, earthquake, and a hailstorm. Okay, just a little piece of information there. The Ark of the Covenant. Where is it now? Where's the Ark of the Covenant?
We don't know.
We don't know.
Oh, no.
We don't know where it is. When do you know when it disappeared? When we don't know where it is anymore? Way, 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 way back. Daniel time at least. When the temple was destroyed and everything was taken out of it. And then there was another temple built, and I don't think the ark was there when, even in Jesus' day, which would be Herod's temple, because Herod enhanced the second temple, the one that was built after the 70 years of Daniel, when some went back in the Ezra and Nehemiah books. You'll read about the temple being rebuilt. I don't know that the Ark of the Covenant was there. I know the Shekinah glory never came to that temple. The Shekinah glory that we had seen from Solomon's prayer going in, when Solomon was praying in the first temple. Okay, but this temple of God is in heaven. We're not talking about the earthly temple here, and the Ark of the Covenant appears there. So whether it's there now, I don't know, but we see it in this point in time. I love that. Okay. Now, we see in chapter 12, what do we see?
Sign.
We see a sign, and then we see a,
Woman.
yes. So we have a woman, that's the first sign. And it's a woman. What about this woman?
She's close to the sun, moon,
So you've got the sun,
and the moon.
moon, and
Stars.
12 stars, right? Okay. If she is